It's great to be here. A very good afternoon to all of you. I would like to thank the organizing committee for having me today. It's my first time in your country, still trying to learn a lot of things, but I'm very excited about what's happening and what I've seen so far. And I think you've got a great potential. So in the next few minutes, what I wanted to talk about is about this disruption, transformation, and change. You will hear a lot today from all the speakers, words like change, disrupt, transform, etc. Why? Because this is what's happening in the world. And some people, some countries, some companies are ahead of the game, but the majority are still lagging behind. And the purpose of this talk today is to tell you what's going on, what are the potential, what are some of the gaps that we see, both from a personal level and also from an organizational level, and how we can make sure that we get ready to capture the global opportunities that exist. Yeah. So, disruption is a word that we're hearing a lot today. And if you look at what's going on today, since the beginning of this century, the world is a very different place. There has been radical change. I'll show you in a few minutes some of the changes that has happened to the planet, to the world, and that how technology is actually leveraging the opportunities that technology provides to solve problems in the world, to get nations and companies ready for the future. We are living in a time of unprecedented technological change. And today, a lot of the things that we considered fiction in the past are now becoming fact. A lot is becoming reality. Some of them we use even for granted without realizing that it's on our phone, etc., etc. So the pace of change today, some people might think is really going very fast, but I can tell you that it is the slowest it will be compared to the future. So change is going to accelerate, the pace of change is going to accelerate, the business landscape is going to change, and disruption today is everywhere. Every company, every organization, every individual is actually experiencing the change. We are living in a time of uncertainty, high complexity, and that we need to make sure that we are able to capitalize on this. Industries today are at a crossroad where they can experience explosive growth opportunities if they are ready. So you've all heard about companies like Kodak, Blockbusters, Borders, BlackBerry, etc. Some of these companies, they were at their peak when they were around. But they forgot that the world is changing. And I think this is the biggest mistake all of us can make, is that having the assumption that what we do today is going to stay like this forever. And there has been casualties. So in this disruption, there will be winners, there will be losers. And we have to choose which one we want to be. If I just give you some data point. If you look at the S&P, Standard & Poor's top 500 companies, which is the 500 largest companies that are quoted on the stock market in the US. In 1958, if you consider the companies who were there, who existed in 1958 compared to today, in 1958, of the 61 companies that exist, there's only 20 today are still around. And if you look at the Fortune 500 in 1955, compared to 2017, you will see that only 60 companies of the 500 companies still exist. So the landscape is changing, companies are going out of business, etc. And even the skills of the people, here you young people, you need to realize that you are going through a very steep learning curve, and that you need to make sure that you are future compatible. A lot of companies have future compatibility tests for the leadership to make sure that companies are aligned in their thought, in the way, in the culture that they have. And I think all of us need to take these kind of tests to see whether we are ready as a person, on a personal level, but also at an organizational level. So it's not going to be business as usual. It's going to be disruption, and disruption is the new normal. I'll start by giving you I'll share 4 slides which I took from McKinsey, which kind of define the context of the world that we are living in today. The first thing that we see is that there is industrialization and urbanization in emerging economies. 50% of the world population today live in urban cities. And every year, 65 million people are moving from rural areas into the cities. What does that mean? It means that there is greater opportunity to actually invest in infrastructure, where investment in infrastructure is going to be much more efficient than ever before. It means that new technology can actually take roots in those places. And also, if you are in the business and you want to sell your products and services, there's going to be 3 billion more people who are going to join the consuming class. If you look at the 2 charts at the bottom, it shows that the urbanization is actually correlated with prosperity of nations. So as companies, as countries urbanize even more, you see that economic prosperity will reach these emerging locations. If you look on the right, it's kind of a very interesting curve where you see that over 1,000 years ago, the center of gravity of economic power was somewhere where it is almost today. And it has moved over like 80 years, something like this, from where it used to be to 1950, it went north and west, and from 1950 until now, it's starting to move back east and south. And today, if you look at 2025, this is where the center of gravity of economic power is going to be. So what does that mean? If you have your strategy as a global company, you need to think about this, that the markets are actually moving and that you have to be ready to capture these opportunities. The second one is that we live in an aging world. In all countries, the fertility rates is reducing regardless of geographies. And this is also an area where I think technology can actually help compensate for the fact that the workforce is contracting. And if you look at this, it shows that if I look at on the right-hand side, this compares a few countries where the working population, the workforce population in 2010 compared to 2015. If I look at China, China had 1 billion people in the workforce in 2012, but in 2050 they will have only 849,000. That's a contraction of 151 million of people disappearing from the workforce. What does that mean? It means that technology will need to come up to actually enable people to be able to continue to sustain these economies. And if you look at Germany, same story. There is going to be a contraction of 27% of their workforce in the next 50 years or so, or 40 years or so. So we need to take this on board, because when we are designing our solutions and looking at strategy for our business, we need to take all of these changes into consideration. The third major force that actually in changing the world is the greater interconnectivity between economies, countries, and companies. So today, when one country gets impacted, the effect can be felt across the board, across the world, some faster than others, but this is one thing that we need to recognize today, is that the workflows or the trade flows has actually changed. If I look at on the right-hand side at the bottom here, it shows that in 1990s, the global trade was equivalent to $1.8 trillion, and in 20 years or so, it has multiplied by 10 times. And it's going to continue accelerate. So if you are doing business, and you'll see also that the size of the bubble also is getting smaller on this side and increasing to the east and to the south. The next one is this one, disruptive technology. And this is where will focus a bit more on my talk today. So technologies today are available. Yeah, all of these technologies today, some of us are already working with those technologies, and all of these now is happening together in one ecosystem. Most of these technologies on their own are not that impactful, but when you put all these technologies into one product, into one service, it becomes transformative. And we are in an age today when all of this is happening. Say that this is the best time to be alive, guys. I think because there's so much opportunity. You can do so many things so differently and with so much impact than previous generations have ever thought possible. And today I'm going to focus primarily on the digital disruption side of this transformation that we are experiencing. So on the right-hand side, you will see that there has been the adoption of these new technologies is increasing significantly. And you can compare how it took for radio, TV, etc., internet to get 50 million customers. And some of them, the radio took 38 years, internet took 3 years, Facebook 1 year. And if you look at Angry Birds, took 35 days. And this is what we're talking about, is that today you can actually build a market that don't actually exist today in a few days, in a few months. So today I'm going to focus on digital disruption. And we start by having this definition, which I picked from the internet. So digital disruption is the change that occurs when new digital technologies and business models, I think we need to understand that it's not just about the technology, but it's the business model change that is supported or enabled by these technological innovation that affect the value proposition of existing goods and services. It means that today we consume previous services differently. using new technologies. And I will use Uber as an example, a very simple example for us to consider. So this is what happened to Uber. Uber actually did not redesign taxis. Uber did not actually change anything about what existed already from an asset point of view. Uber just redesigned the experience of the journey. By looking at what was happening in terms of the taxi industry and see how we can simplify, how we can make the journey more pleasant to the traveler. And what they did is that in the traditional taxi model, when you need a taxi, you will have to pick up your phone and call a taxi. And if you're traveling in a foreign country, you don't know which number to call. And if you want to kind of go on the road and stand where, in a corner where you know the majority of taxis will go, you don't have a clue if you're traveling, yeah? So Uber found that this was an inconvenience, okay? And the second thing is that when you meet a taxi driver and you say, hey, I want to go to B, they will say, oh, I'm not going that direction. So you actually waste your time by stopping a taxi that can't actually take you to the place. And then you go, and guess what? He doesn't have enough change. Or maybe he doesn't have a receipt, because if you're traveling on business, you want a receipt. Yeah? And sorry, guys, I don't have a receipt. So there was a lot of inconvenience in that journey in the past. And Uber took this opportunity and said, hey, let's come up with an app. The app actually defines where you are, where you want to go. You don't have to explain to the driver where you want to go. He knows exactly where you want to go. If he knows he can't take you there, he will not show up. So all of this has been eliminated. All you do, you get your app, you order the taxi, it takes a few minutes to get to where you are, and you just sit and you just get off. You don't have to worry about receipt because all of this is tracked on your app, and you don't have to worry about payment. It's going to be credited directly from your credit card. So the experience has changed. They're using the same assets, but with an app, they have simplified. It's reduced the cost. The cost of an Uber drive, depending on which country you are, is between 10 and 30% cheaper, and it's good for the consumer from an experience and also from an affordability. So this kind of captures exactly what digital disruption means to companies and to business models. So if you look at what are the benefits of this, kind of using Uber again as an example, is that it's created an enriched experience between people and machines, between you and your smartphone, etc. It's much richer. You get a lot of information, and this information, it can be transformed into insight for you to understand what's going on. It creates new capabilities, yeah? So things that was not possible before, but when you have these technology at your disposal, you are able to do things that you could not do before, and it's actually create better economic opportunities. If I look at Uber, for example, one of the things that happened is that you exploded the transportation business by not putting an additional car on the road. It used the infrastructure that already exists. And this created a lot of economic opportunities for people who did not have to go and buy a taxi, get a license for a taxi, etc. They can actually do and get involved in the business, yeah? And also it improved the engagement between the customer and the service provider. As you know, on Uber, when you go for a drive, you actually rate the driver. 2-star, 1-star, 5-star. And the driver also rate the passenger. Yeah, if it is a lousy, terrible passenger, nobody probably wants to pick that passenger. But they have a record on the passenger and they have a record on the driver. And if the driver's star is low, guess what? Uber is going to call him for training because he has to be trained to be much more customer-centric. And if the customer is a lousy customer and realizing every time he orders a taxi, nobody's turning up, he might say, hey, maybe I'm not that nice, yeah? I need to kind of change. So in actual fact, this actually is bring change of behaviors, both from the service provider and the consumer. And I think this is great. And also there's the affordability of the service, which is amazing, yeah? So what's new about this disruption? I mean, we have had disruption for a number of years. The Industrial Revolution disrupted a lot of the industries already. A lot of people have a lot of apprehension what Industrial Revolution will do and scared about it will kill jobs, etc. And guess what? It created more jobs. For example, when they eliminated the horse carriages with cars, a lot of people say, hey, a lot of people are going to lose jobs. So what they forgot is that now you can sell cars any part of the world. So it's actually expanded the industry. So what's new about this disruption? I think the first thing is that the speed of change, yeah? So we are no longer moving on to a linear path, but it is more exponential. So we are able to achieve more in much, much shorter time. And today, as I showed you in a previous slide, the speed of take-up of new business to get 1 million customers or to get 50 million customers is getting faster all the time, yeah? And the speed of innovation, yeah? Today, people are able to discover more things because there are more tools in your toolbox to do things that today you are able to accomplish much, much more. If I look at the last 20 years compared to the last 200 years, we've actually achieved much more in the last 20 years than the 200 years. And guess what? In the next 5 years, we've achieved even more than in the last 50 years. I think this is what this new is about, what's new about this disruption we're talking about. The second thing is that the technology is maturing. If I look at artificial intelligence, we've been talking about this, been around since the 1950s. But it's only now that we are able to kind of put this in practice and get people to actually use it in their day-to-day life. And if I look at the printing, the 3D printing technology also has been here since the 1980s. But today it's been perfected, it's been matured, and this is in a format that you can actually integrate this in your services and in your products. And then there's convergence. Most of these technologies are not disruptive on their own, as a stand-alone. But when you put all of this in one ecosystem, it becomes profoundly disruptive. And that's why we're seeing so much change in so little time. Everything in the world today is wired. Whether you're a car, whether you're a farm, you're an office, even human bodies are being wired today with technology. And the last one is user experience design. Now, this is the key to a lot of this transformation. It's like starting point of designing every good and service is put the customer at the center and anticipate what would be great user experience, yeah? And today, customers are actually dictating the pace of change. Let me give you a simple analogy here. So today, what we're seeing is that every one of us, we have built our preferred solution stack. Basically, what it means is that I have chosen how I want the world to interact with me. I have chosen a kind of smartphone. I have chosen one of the fastest network. I'm using the best app. I'm connected to the cloud, and I'm using AI. Now, who wants to work with me? So companies are actually trying to play catch-up now, because in order for them to sell products to the consumer, they will have to re-engineer their business so that they can actually connect and communicate on that level. So this is also what's transformative today, is that either the company say, hey, I don't want to change, but if you don't want to change, then you're going to lose out. Or the company say, hey, I want to reshape my business so that I'm able to communicate and get that market served. I think this is something that's very, very important. Start always with the customer or the user in mind to start with. Now, what is enabling this disruption very quickly? It's the hyperconnectivity, yeah. Everything is connected. 4 billion people in the world are actually connected through the internet today. The speed of that connection is increasing, threefold increase in the next 5 years. And it will continue to increase. It's going to be faster, you're going to get real-time response when you're using the service, and you have this hyperconnectivity throughout your supply chain. The second thing is about computing power. The computing power, here we have seen a 1,000-fold increase in the last 10 years. In your smartphone that we all use and we have with us, it says that the smartphone has millions of times more computing power than the guidance computer that took man on the moon, Apollo 11 in 1969. This small, tiny smartphone has more, 1 million times more computing power than this guidance computer that took. And they said that in 1990, if you were to design a computer with the same power than your smartphone, it would have cost $40 million. This shows how this computing power has really exploded. And then there's mobile devices. The mobile devices enable that ecosystem. It's the gateway to the ecosystem. And when you use the mobile devices, you're constantly adding data, continuously. So this is the gateway, and it's driven by usage and data. And if I look at Africa, I'll just give you an indication how mobile devices have actually transformed the country. Africa has leapfrogged from 400,000 fixed lines to 800 million smartphones or mobile phones in just 15 years. And this has enabled a lot of services, whether it's banking or otherwise, to be able to be provided by just this mobile device that is available today to the whole planet. Yeah? And then there's data. Data, there is an unprecedented level of data today. Data is the fuel or the oil of the 21st century. Data is king. If you want to control your market, you want to control the world, guess what? Whoever controls the data. That's why we see a lot of these tech firms doing a lot about this. So data is also disrupting a lot of the industries. 90% of data that exists today was only created 2 years ago. And they say that the data is going to increase tenfold by 2025. And some people argue that the financial crisis of 2008 could have been prevented if we were able to analyze the amount of unstructured data in financial system by using cognitive computing. Hopefully, we've learned our lessons, yeah? And then there's sensors all over the place. There are billions of them everywhere. And all of these sensors are getting more data into the system, enable us to manage things differently. And there's a cloud, the affordability of actually technology to anyone, anywhere, anytime. And then there's software. Software is eating the world, they say. Yeah? In every good and service today that we consume, there's software. So all of these is contributing to change the world as we know it today. And they are all at the same time. Amazon is another example that I want to look at and see what we can learn with this company. Yeah? Amazon, as you know, has started by selling books, and then they went into retail, and then they recently acquired a food chain, and then now they announced that they want to get into healthcare. We don't know which industry they can. It looks like they can be in any industry. And Amazon is guided by these 4 guiding principles, and one of them is interesting. I mean, all of them are interesting, but there's one thing they say: they are not obsessed by their competitor. They're obsessed by the customer. A lot of companies are actually trying to beat competitors. Amazon say, no, we don't care about our competitors. If we look after our people and we focus our business and transformation on the people, guess what? We don't have to worry about our competitors. So they're obsessed about their customers, yeah? And there's a passion for invention, yeah? The CEO of Amazon says, my job as a CEO is to reduce the cost of experimentation so that my people can actually test more products and more processors than before. And I think this is very important, this passion for invention. And then operational excellence, looking at process, reducing the number of steps in what you do, and also have this long-term thinking. Yeah. Amazon is kind of company where when they look at the world, they constantly scan the world and say, why are they doing it this way? And I think this is the kind of mindset that we need to have when we look at things and say, there must be a different way, there must be a better way. Let's try and find it, and that's kind of the essence of what Amazon is all about. And also they invest a lot. I mean, I've said here that they spent $16 billion last year on their R&D. They've acquired 128 startups in the last 20 years. Amazing. Briefly, industries are changing. I've picked just a few to kind of illustrate what I'm talking about. If I look at the automotive industry, and I know Bosch has got a big stake into this industry, the automotive industry today is very different to what it was before, okay? A car today is a computer. A car has the power of 20 PCs inside the car. And they say that a car today has 100 million of code lines in the car. Yeah, can you imagine, yeah, how sophisticated the cars of today has become? And when a car leaves an assembly line to the end of the manufacturing, there has been more software engineers working on the car than mechanical engineers, because the car today has become much more influenced by technology, yeah? And we will live in an era of sharing economy. Today, they estimate that only 4% of the time we are using our cars. So that's kind of very inefficient way of using assets. And then people have done surveys, and a lot of people say that, you know what, I don't care, I don't need to own a car. So there are about 50% of people say, hey, I can let go of private ownership. Now, what does that mean to car manufacturing companies? Yeah. And the car today is becoming much more. The purpose of a car today is much more than going from A to B. The car is becoming almost a place of work and play. Inside your car will drive itself, hopefully safely, and you can work, you can play, you can do whatever you want. So when you design the car of tomorrow, it's going to be very different to how you design the car today. And so all of this is happening because of these technologies that enable us. I know that today, with what's happened recently with Tesla car, people are getting concerned, etc. But you know, Google car have been covering almost 4 million miles since they started. And they have had minor crashes. People say that today, autonomous car is more safe than human-driven cars. Now, you can argue with this, but look at data. In the US, on average, one driver will have an accident every 140,000 miles. And Google Car has done 4 million miles and has not had that many accidents. In actual fact, what other thing they say is that the question is, do we humans need to drive as the robots or the autonomous cars, or the autonomous cars need to learn how to drive as human? Because what they found is that a lot of times the autonomous cars actually behave in a certain way when they see all this data, and which is very different to how humans, and that's why the humans very often bump into the car at the back. Yeah. Just ponder about this, guys, yeah. Oops. The next one I want to talk about is banking and financial services. Now, this is another area where it's really, really being disrupted. In all these four areas, and I like what was about the video about Bosch, and I think it's all about making life better for people. Yeah, if you look at on the car side, it's going to be safer, hopefully with these new technologies. If I look at the banking side, a lot of people are unbanked in the world. The World Bank says that in the last 4 years, 700 million people have been able to get into the system of the banking because of the fact that digital disruption has enabled this to happen. Yeah. By 2025, there will be 2 billion more people that will have access to a bank account. And most of them, 80% of them, will never put their feet in a bank branch. This is almost like the death of a bank branch, yeah? And the cost of transaction, they say that today, if you compare a cost per transaction using a branch compared to digital banking, in a branch, it's about $4 per transaction. In digital banking, it's 17 cents. That's 95% of saving that is brought. And who is the biggest winner here is the consumer. So the bank is changing a lot. And today, banks are being rivaled by non-traditional institutions like mobile companies. For example, in Africa, there is a company called MTN. They are a mobile operator. And the CEO recently said that they want to be the biggest bank in Africa in the next 4 years with 60 million customers. Yeah? I mean, they are not even a bank. But this is what's happening in this disruptive world. Anybody can actually jump into the opportunities. A lot of people today think that, okay, if tomorrow Apple or Facebook or Google are able to provide financial services, I can shift from my traditional bank into this. About a third of Americans have said this, yeah? So this means that the banks need to kind of re-engineer their business, yeah? And obviously money is digitizing, etc. I won't get into this. Now, the education is another big area also where we see significant transformation. As you know, a lot of countries in the world, if I look at Africa, for example, Africa's population is about 1.2 billion today. In 2050, it's going to be 2 billion. In 2100, it's going to be 4 billion. I mean, that's bigger than put India and China together. Now, there is going to be a big demand for education, access to education. Now, in the traditional model of delivery of education, it's impossible to actually meet those targets. So what's happening is that digital education is getting into the equation. And you have heard about the MOOC system, yeah? That's alternative to the traditional universities. The MOOC, the massive online, open online courses. edX is one of them. There's Coursera, etc. If I look at edX was started in 2012. In 5 years, they've been able to get over 14 million students. Yeah, no universities can do this, yeah? But they've been able to have these learners, and every year they're adding 4 million new learners into the system. They're almost adding a student at zero marginal cost. It doesn't cost them anything to add another 100, another 1,000. That's the power of transformation and digital disruption. And when we look at edX again, they have been able to customize the learning, and you know what? A lot of the essays that you submit to edX is actually rated by robots, yeah, through AI. It's not even a lecturer that's kind of rating your coursework. It's amazing. It means that, remember, if you had to rate 4 million people's essays, it's going to take hundreds of years, yeah? This is what technology, the power of technology enabling access to education at very low cost, and the world needs it. If I look at Sub-Saharan Africa, they say that by 2035, they will need to find jobs for 18 million people. So it means that at least the equivalent has to go through the education system. And the only way forward is a combination, a hybrid model of using the traditional peer-to-peer learning, as well as the digital education. You see, all of these transformation and digital and disruption are actually solving real problems in society today. And the last one I'm going to talk about is about healthcare. Healthcare also, as you know, has been very slow to change for a number of years, but recently is poised for explosive transformation and disruption. And recently, Amazon and JP Morgan Chase and Berkshire Hathaway, Warren Buffett's company, announced that they're going to create this massive healthcare company. And the objective is to make sure that they are able to serve people. As you know, in the US, healthcare is a big challenge. They will be able to serve people at a much lower cost. Initially, they are going to do it for their organizations, about 1 million employees. But guess what? After that, they're going to do it for the whole country and the whole world. So healthcare is being disrupted. And today, we are seeing, again, in some emerging economies, there's not enough doctors, there's not enough healthcare professionals. In very advanced economies, you have almost a doctor for every 250 and 300 people. In Africa, in some countries of Africa, there is one doctor for 20,000 people. And you can't have enough doctors trained in time. So the only option is to use technology. Yeah, you use technology. I was reading recently a blog from somebody I know from India, and as you know, India has got these massive outsourcing companies, and a lot of these companies are actually being disrupted by robot automation process. A lot of these processing is going to happen with robots, and she was saying, how can we actually use that workforce, that they are trained, they are used to work with processors, with technology, and she said maybe in the future, you will have robots as being the main doctor with all the knowledge, with all the diagnostic, and you have these people who are not professional in medicine to be their assistant. Amazing way of thinking, yeah. And I don't think that this is any possibility, by the way. And I think human has limitations, and many of these systems, like IBM Watson, he's got teething problem at the moment. So healthcare is going to be a major area of disruption, yeah? I won't go through this. You're all very familiar with this. A lot of these companies, as you see, when they were founded, they were not here for a number of years, but they have actually been market dominant in many of their areas, yeah? Netflix, interesting to note here, and this is where people don't pay attention. When Netflix appeared, Blockbuster had the opportunity to buy Netflix for $50 million in 2000, but they refused. They thought, oh, Netflix is not going to be around. Okay, we got a better product. We got customers who love us, will stay with us. And guess what? They went out of business, and Netflix actually took over. And this will probably go down in history as one of the biggest missed opportunities in boardroom history. I think these are the kind of things that can happen, yeah? So these are the disruptors. There's Alibaba, as you know, largest, and you can compare the market cap or their value with Walmart, which is a more traditional retailer. It's amazingly different, yeah? And today, you also have Alibaba creating the largest money market fund in the world with $235 billion of asset. Facebook has 2.2 billion users. A social network now has become a distribution channel. Amazing transformation. Airbnb, Uber, we've talked about this. Yeah, they have so many interactions with the users, etc. I mean, in the past, what I've also noticed here is that technology is changing habits and is changing culture. When all of us, we were told when we were young, don't bring strangers home, yeah? That's exactly the opposite that Airbnb is doing, yeah? Don't get in a car with a stranger. This is what Uber's doing, yeah? So technology is actually changing habits of people, yeah, and culture. Let's move on, yeah? The challenges that's facing businesses in this new landscape, yeah? First, there's a lack of foresight. A lot of people don't seem to see what's on the horizon, what's going to happen, yeah? Now, technology doesn't just appear overnight. You don't just wake up today and say, oh, where does this come from? A lot of problems, well, a lot of concerns that people have is that they don't actually follow the trend. They don't see these emerging competitors coming, yeah? If I look at the printing industry very briefly, imagine this printing company in 30 years ago, yeah? And so this printing company was actually selling invoice pads or receipts, books, etc. So business is great. And then suddenly they start to seeing their business decline, revenue decline. So here he's got two options. Either you say, I want to be more aggressive in my marketing, send more people on the road to get to sell more so that I can sustain and grow my revenue, or he should say, what's happening to my business? And many of businesses, what they do, they just pretend that they are okay. They forget that Office has appeared. They forget that today every person can buy their own printer. And guess what? By the time the person realizes, it's too late. There's no cash to actually pump into the business to transform it. Now, this is very much kind of illustrate what's happening to a lot of the businesses today. Watch the trends. Second one is about competitors' landscape. Today, in this world that we live, we don't even know who are our competitors. Yeah. Going back to the healthcare example, who would have guessed that Amazon and Morgan Chase will be in healthcare business? Nobody. So the lines between sectors and industries are blurring more and more. Anybody today can go almost in any industry because they have the capabilities. A lot of times in the past, many of these companies were protected by large safety nets. But today what's happening is that they are seeing all of these being eroded. Yeah? There is organizational inertia. Companies too big or too slow to change. Yeah? So moving very quickly to this. Yeah? What companies need to do to succeed? I think the first thing is the leadership. Yeah? The leadership needs to have the vision, needs to understand what's going on in the world. Yeah? They need to build new skill set. The companies need to change in terms of the skill set, because the skill set that we had in the past will not enable us to go into the future. Change is becoming extremely difficult and complex. In traditional industries, 70% of change programs fail. Imagine what it will happen now with this much faster growing organization. Think about exponential growth. Don't think about the 3%, 4% year-over-year improvement. Think about explosive growth. Build ecosystem, partner build alliances and partnership. Don't try to do all of it yourself. Look at the companies who are non-competing with you, partner with them to enable you to use their capabilities instantly. Cannibalize your own business. Look at your business and say, this is for the future, this one doesn't have a future, and intentionally try to move resources and funding from one to the other. Okay? Leverage startups. Yeah, look at the startups landscape, and also watch newcomers on the horizon. Yeah. This is kind of a study from Silicon Valley. You look at many of the large organizations, like the large disruptors, like the PayPal mafia, they call them, these guys. And what are the behaviors? Yeah. And if I look at one thing that they have is leapfrogging mindset. Yeah, they always think about the next big thing, the next radical change that they can bring to the industry, to their business. Yeah. The second thing is that they constantly push boundaries. They all push the limits every year on their people. Yeah, there's a better way. I think Steve Jobs was great at doing this. Yeah, he was never happy with second best. He wanted to push constantly his team. And I think if we want to win in this game, we have to constantly say, there's a better way. There's a bigger way of doing this. The third one is integrate data with intuition. In this much faster moving, you can't use raw data. You can't use hard data, because hard data is good for the past. But in the future, you can't actually base yourself on hard past data to predict the future. So you have to use a lot of your intuition. This is where associational thinking of leaders make a big difference. These are leaders who can actually connect the dots on all the things that are happening in their ecosystem. You have to modify your assumptions as you progress, and use surprise as a strategic tool. Yeah, I think these sometimes have a challenge from a culture of a company or a culture of the country. But when you try something, it fails, learn from it, it becomes a strategic tool for you to plan for the future. I'll close with this. This is my last slide. Okay. This very much, the tale of two cities very much describe what we are living today. It was the best of times, it was the worst of times, it was the age of wisdom, it was the age of foolishness. Now we need to decide which camp we want to be. And I think I'll just close by saying that although there is a lot of these changes, and many people are getting nervous, even young people, about their careers, their jobs, what degree they need to do, etc. But what I can tell you, this is the best time to be alive on this planet, because there is huge opportunity for those willing to put in the effort. So let's all be disruptors instead of being disrupted by others. Thank you very much.
I have some questions. Thank you, Vidia, so much for the inspirational lecture. We have received a lot of questions. Slido is on fire. Unfortunately, we don't have the time for all of them, so we'll just go through two quickest, and I encourage all of you to approach Vidia during the breaks and ask him the question personally. So question number one, how can we make sure or measure that an idea is disruptive enough, and not just innovation, but truly disrupting the existing model?
How can we measure?
Yes.
Wow. I think experimentation, looking at data, testing things is very important. I think is about also understanding your culture. I think this is very important. I mean, you can have an aspiration to do something that you think will disrupt, but are you able to actually sustain this? So the best ideas can fail, not because it is the worst idea. It's just because you don't have the culture and the capability internally to make it happen. I think this is something that, I mean, you need also a leap of faith to some extent. A lot of the massive disruption we've seen, a lot of these people think those guys are foolish, they're crazy. But guess what? As they went, they get better insight. They thought that this is the way forward, and they started going this way, and they discovered, no, let's turn a little bit, because they're gathering information insight along the way. I think it's a very hard question, but the people who can crack this are the guys who are going to create these multi-billion companies, yeah.
Thank you. The second question is probably related to your expertise and your experience. Is this digital disruption a big chance for emerging markets like Serbia?
Yeah, definitely. Mauritius, we are a small country, you're bigger than us. But I think when I look at disruption, I can see that this actually put all nations on level playing field. If you look at Estonia, it's a very small country, yeah? And Estonia with Skype has done tremendously well. And why not Serbia? Why not Mauritius? I think this is the age where a lot of companies who were at a disadvantage because of their size and their resources today are able to disrupt. Because a lot of the large companies, like if you look at Google and all these companies and Amazon, they are not scared about the big players already in the market that they know. They're more scared about the smaller players who are somewhere hidden that are working on solutions that will take market share from them. So I would say great news for all emerging countries, yeah?
Thank you so much, Vidia.
Thank you.
We're in for a break of 20-something minutes. We'll reconvene at 2:30 and continue with our IoT block. See you soon.